And then we've got, oh my gosh, I'm drawing a blank on his name. Cole Sprouse character. Will. Sorry. Then we've got Will, who is kind of doom and gloom. These things aren't working. I would rather live in peace than, keep fighting and pretending that things are going to get better. Which I feel like a lot of people are going to view his character and say he is such a pessimist. But the reality, I think, is that it's more, in my opinion, it leans more towards realist approach than pessimism. Accepting the reality of your situation, isn't always going to turn people towards being, I don't want to bother with these treatments or regimens. But I feel like his character encompasses a time that we all go through in our lives at one point. Just in a sense of, I think at one point or another, we all have this thought of, is this really helping? And we may not live in that place the way this character did, but that representation of these hard times is so important, especially when you've got, Stella, who is kind of the exact opposite, who gives him, the hope that just because it's not working now doesn't mean it never will. So it's really cool to see, because as a person with CF, I am both of those people, just depending on the day of the week. And so much of that sunshining personality in me pulls that realist personality in me, out of the dark times. So it's just cool to see that kind of yin and yang that you can't quite, and you see Stella go through a mental hardship, and you learn a lot more about her. And survivor's guilt is mentioned, which is brilliant, and I love that they went to that place with the film and her character, because that's such a reality, and it's something I personally kind of dealt with on and off. Some days it creeps up, and some days it doesn't. But survivor's guilt, for me, is watching my friends who have had CF, who are younger than me, pass away, and knowing that the reality is there's nothing I could have done, but it does not negate this responsibility to continue helping the people who are going to still be in that situation. It's a really sad fact to realize, but it's kind of that sounding pessimistic but realist side that we are still going to lose people who have CF. And maybe by putting in a little effort today, it's going to change somebody else's life tomorrow. So I like that they talked about survivor's guilt, because and especially in the transplant community, there's a lot of mental health issues related to people feeling that they have lived and someone else has died for them. I mean, which isn't, I'm going to say that's not how I view transplant, but that is a big problem that a lot of people end up dealing with. So even just having that term put out there, maybe somebody will look it up who thinks they might be dealing with something similar, who's seen the film. I mean, even if they don't have CF, survivor's guilt is a reality for a lot of people who have lost loved ones or friends, or even just been in bad situations where people have passed away. So that, in a whole, is a great thing to put out in the universe to have talked about. So I'm really glad that was discussed, and because it's really sad that anybody experiences that. It's the kind of thing, if you could take it away, you would, because, especially living with something like CF, nobody deserves to feel guilty for living, and that's just the reality of it sometimes. Okay, the third CF from the film is Poe. I'm going to say he's a main character too. Like, he's obviously not one of the two leads, but his presence is, I don't want to say like even more important than the other two characters, but what he adds as a character to the film is like another perspective, another personality type that you kind of see in people with CF. We learn through the film that I'm trying to think of a way to say it, I'm sorry. He terminates his own happiness at the expense of people around him. That's something I've seen in the CF community. That's something I've done. I mean, it is easier to be in control of the pain to the people around you than it is to think of what happens when suddenly you're not there and when I went through my transplant process, it happened very, very fast. And I was actually told by a doctor that I would have maybe a couple hours left to live at one point. The one doctor I had really didn't think I was going to make it. And she vocalized that to me and my family. I had this responsibility of controlling how that information managed to get to the people around me. And not only that did I have to tell people, I had to set up these maybe 2 weeks in a way that the people around me could spend the rest of their lives without thinking about that time, if that makes sense. I know what I'm thinking, but I don't know how to say it. But it control, knowing the end is imminent and present, you suddenly have this realization that you have friends and you have family, and it feels vain to say something like they're going to miss me, but I guess I hope they do, but I also hope they don't. But between getting to that realization, and then getting to death, it is an easier burden to be alone than to handle all of those people being sad at your absence. And, okay, this might be a little spoiler. At one point, it's addressed that Poe ends all of his relationships because he feels bad that, I'm going to try, I'm not going to quote it perfectly, but he even says something along the lines, what does someone get for loving me? Medical bills, like suffering, and after all that, they lose me anyway. And that, it's true. And the reality is we have to learn to value ourselves over those hardships, which for some people is very easy. For some people, they would rather do what the character did and cut the people they love out of their lives so they don't have that expense. And it just, it's easy to say that's wrong, but it's also, I think, easy to look at it and say, like, as someone who's been in that position, I understand that mentality.